Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary, Pennsylvania, 1989. A 47-year-old Italian Mafia capo named Vincenzo stands at the prison phone in the rec room. He has been at Lewisburg for 8 years. He is connected to the Gambino family on the outside. He has corrupt guards on his payroll. He has lawyers waiting for his calls. Vincenzo owns this phone. Every Italian inmate in Lewisburg knows it. Every white inmate, every Latino inmate, every guard. That phone is his. A 22-year-old black inmate from Washington, D.C. walks up to the line. He waits behind Vincenzo. 2 minutes pass, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. The black inmate clears his throat. He says one word, wrap. He means wrap up the call. Vincenzo turns around, he looks at the kid. He laughs, he goes back to his conversation. 48 hours later, Vincenzo is dead in the prison laundry room. Stabbed 14 times, the killers were 3 members of a federal prison gang nobody on the streets had ever heard of. A gang nobody outside the Federal Bureau of Prisons knew existed. A gang that did not have rappers writing songs about them. No movies, no magazine covers, no books. A gang that quietly killed an Italian mafia capo over a phone call. And then forced the most powerful crime family in America to negotiate a peace treaty. Their name was the DC Blacks. This is their story. They were the most feared black prison gang in the entire federal system. A gang the FBI built a special task force to investigate. A gang that has outlasted every other black crew of its era. And a gang that you have probably never heard of. Until now. The DC Blacks were not formed on the streets of Washington, D.C. They were formed inside a federal prison cell block in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. Lewisburg in 1972 was one of the most violent federal prisons in America. The Italian Mafia ran the white side of the yard. The Aryan Brotherhood ran the rest of the white inmates. The Mexican Mafia controlled the southwestern Latino population. The Black Guerrilla family, founded by George Jackson in California, ran most of the West Coast black inmates. Black prisoners from Washington, D.C. arrived at Lewisburg with no protection. They had no national gang, no street affiliation that translated to the federal system, no allies inside the walls. They were targets. The Italians extorted them. The Aryan Brotherhood threatened them. The Mexican Mafia ignored them. The Black Guerrilla family did not recognize East Coast inmates as their problem. So a small group of DC inmates inside Lewisburg made a decision. They would form their own crew, their own protection, their own car. They called themselves DC Blacks. There was no founder, no top boss, no grand initiation ceremony. They were just black men from Washington, D.C. who agreed to protect each other behind bars. By 1975, the rule had become absolute. If you were black and from Washington, D.C. and you walked into the federal prison system, you were DC Blacks. You did not have to ask, you did not have to vote, you did not have to fight your way in. The day you crossed the gate, you were one of them. That single rule, that geographic automatic membership, would turn the DC Blacks into the largest black prison gang in federal history. Inside the DC Blacks, you do not tell people your name. You tell people your zip code. Washington, D.C. has 8 major neighborhoods that produce most of the city's federal inmates. Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, Southwest, Anacostia, Trinidad, Carver-Langston, far northeast. Each section has its own zip codes. Each zip code has its own crew on the outside. Each crew has its own beefs, its own history, its own dead. When a new DC inmate walks into a federal prison, the first question another DC Black asks him is not what his name is, it is what zip code he is from. 20019 is far northeast, 20020 is Anacostia, 20002 is Trinidad and Carver-Langston. The answer determines everything. Where you eat, who you talk to, who you trust, who you avoid. Because the zip code beefs from DC streets travel into federal prisons. If two zip codes were at war on the outside, that war continues on the inside, sometimes for decades, sometimes long after the men who started the original beef are dead. This is what makes the DC Blacks different from every other prison gang in America. The Aryan Brotherhood is one organization with one council. The Mexican Mafia is one organization with one leadership structure. The Black Guerrilla family has one central committee. The DC Blacks are not one gang. They are a federation of zip code crews who agreed to a single rule. If outsiders attack any of us, we attack outsiders together. If we have problems with each other, we settle them ourselves. That structure is what kept them alive when every other black prison gang of their era got dismantled. For most of the 1970s and the 1980s, the Italian Mafia ran every federal prison on the East Coast. They had decades of experience. They had organized crime money on the outside paying for legal defense on the inside. They had corrupt guards smuggling contraband. They had a clear hierarchy that made decisions fast. The DC Blacks were nobody, a loose federation of black men from one American city. The Italians did not respect them. The Italians extorted them. The Italians took their phone time. The Italians bullied them in the chow hall. The Italians treated them the way every other federal prison gang treated DC men in the 1970s. That changed in the late 1980s. DC Blacks members began carrying out hits on Italian Mafia inmates inside federal prisons. A capo at Lewisburg was stabbed 14 times in a laundry room over a phone call. A soldier at USP Atlanta was beaten to death with a metal mop handle in a stairwell. A made man at USP Lompoc was stabbed in the prison library over a missing pack of cigarettes. 3 Italian Mafia members dead inside federal prisons in less than 18 months. Each murder was carried out by DC Blacks members. Each killing happened in front of multiple witnesses. Not a single witness would talk to federal investigators. The Italian leadership inside the federal prison system held a meeting. They had 2 choices. They could go to war with a gang that had thousands of members in every federal prison and hundreds of new members arriving every year, or they could negotiate. In 1990, inside a federal prison in Pennsylvania, senior Italian Mafia members and senior DC Blacks members sat down at a table in the rec room. They negotiated a peace treaty. The terms were simple. The Italians stopped extorting DC inmates. The DC Blacks stopped killing Italian inmates. Each gang controlled its own territory inside the prison. Disputes would be handled diplomatically before turning into violence. The Italian Mafia, the most organized and powerful criminal organization in American history, sat down at a table with a federal prison gang made up of black men from one American city and asked for terms. Other federal prison gangs took notes. Within 5 years, the DC Blacks had similar peace treaties or working relationships with the Aryan Brotherhood, the Mexican Mafia, and the Latin Kings. The DC Blacks had become the most diplomatically powerful black gang in federal prison history, without ever putting a single member on the street, without ever selling a single drug, without ever doing anything that would be famous on the outside. By the late 1990s, federal prosecutors had a problem. The DC Blacks were operating in over 60 federal prisons. They were running phone schemes, contraband networks, hit contracts, and witness intimidation operations that stretched from Lewisburg, Pennsylvania to ADX Florence, Colorado. Federal prosecutors could not break them. The standard tools of organized crime prosecution did not work on the DC Blacks. There was no top boss to flip. The decentralized structure meant taking down one crew did not affect the others. There was no national headquarters to raid. The gang existed inside federal prison cells. There was no informant problem to exploit. DC Blacks members did not cooperate. Their families and homes in DC were too easy to find. Witness protection programs could not protect a man whose own zip code knew where his mother lived. In 1998, the FBI made a decision. They created a dedicated task force inside the Washington, D.C. field office. The task force had one job: investigate, infiltrate, and dismantle the D.C. blacks. The unit was given access to federal prison phone monitoring, federal prison mail screening, long-term informant cultivation budgets, and cooperation agreements with the Bureau of Prisons. For comparison, the only other black gang to ever receive a dedicated FBI task force was the Black Guerrilla family in California. The DC Blacks Task Force has now been operating for over 25 years. It has produced dozens of indictments, RICO convictions, murder convictions, and federal prison transfers across the entire system. The gang has continued to grow. Today, the FBI estimates that the DC Blacks have between 800 and 1,500 active members inside federal prisons. Members who never asked to join. Members who became DC Blacks the moment they walked through the federal prison gate with a Washington, D.C. address. The task force is still active. The gang is still here. The investigation has not stopped them. ADX Florence in Colorado is the most secure federal prison in the United States. It is where the federal government sends inmates who cannot be controlled in any other facility. The Unabomber, Ramsey Youssef, Sammy the Bull, Larry Hoover, Joaquin Guzman Loera, El Chapo. The Boston Marathon bomber. ADX is supposed to be a place where prison gangs cannot operate. Inmates spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. They eat alone, they exercise alone. They have minimal contact with other inmates. The DC Blacks figured out how to operate inside ADX. Federal investigations have documented that DC Blacks members at ADX pass messages through corrupt guards, through legal mail, through coded letters to family members, through the limited recreation time they share, and through their lawyers. Wayne Silk Perry, the DC hitman who killed his own girlfriend to keep her from talking, is a member of the DC Blacks. He is at ADX right now. Rayful Edmond, the man who ran the largest open-air drug market in American history on Hanover Place, is a member of the DC Blacks. He is at ADX right now. Dozens of other DC inmates serving life sentences in the most secure prison in America are members of the DC Blacks. The federal government has spent millions of dollars trying to break the communication network of the DC Blacks inside ADX. They have failed. The gang continues to operate inside the most secure prison in the country. The crack era produced dozens of black prison gangs. The BMF crew tried to consolidate inside federal prison after the Flannery brothers were sentenced. The junior black Mafia from Philadelphia tried to organize across federal facilities after Aaron Jones went to death row. The New York boys, the Detroit boys, the Chicago folks, every major black drug crew of the 1980s tried to maintain their organization behind bars. By 2010, almost every one of those gang formations had been dismantled, fragmented, or absorbed into larger formations. The DC Blacks are still here. They are still active in over 60 federal prisons. They are still adding new members every time a black man from Washington, D.C. enters federal custody. Why? Because the DC Blacks made one decision in 1972 that no other black prison gang made. They did not build a hierarchy. Every other black prison gang built a top-down structure with a boss, a council, and a chain of command. Those organizations could be decapitated by federal prosecutors, flipping the leadership. The DC Blacks built a federation of zip codes. You cannot decapitate a federation. You cannot flip a boss who does not exist. You cannot prosecute the leadership of an organization that has no leadership. Every other black prison gang depended on outside resources, outside money, outside connections. When their leaders went to prison, their organizations weakened. The DC Blacks were born inside prison. They never depended on outside resources. Prison was their kingdom from day one. Every other black prison gang allowed members to leave or transfer their loyalty to other crews. The DC Blacks made membership automatic and permanent. You did not choose to join, you did not choose to leave. That structure has now survived 50 years. It survived through the crack era, through 3 strikes laws, through RICO indictments, through ADX Florence transfers, and through dozens of federal task force investigations. It is still here, it is still operating, it is still untouchable. Here is what the DC Blacks story tells us about America. The Federal Bureau of Prisons holds 150,000 men. Roughly 38% of those men are black. Inside the prison walls, men organize for survival. They organize by race, by region, by city, by neighborhood. For most black inmates, those affiliations are loose. They shift over time. They depend on circumstance. A man can change his car, he can switch crews, he can leave one organization and join another. For inmates from Washington, D.C., that is not a choice. If you are black and from D.C. and you go to federal prison, you are DC Blacks. The day you walk through the gate, the second another DC inmate hears your zip code. The moment you say what neighborhood you are from, you become part of an organization that has existed since 1972 and has outlasted every effort to destroy it. The DC Blacks are not famous. They have no rappers writing songs about them. No movies, no documentaries, no magazine covers, no HBO specials. But every guard inside Lewisburg, USP Atlanta, USP Coleman, USP Pollock, and ADX Florence knows their name. Every inmate inside those facilities knows their reputation. Every federal prosecutor who has ever investigated organized crime in the federal prison system has hit a wall when they got to them. That wall is still standing today. That wall is the DC Blacks. They are the most violent black prison gang in federal history. They are the gang that forced the Italian Mafia to ask for peace. They are the gang that the FBI built a special task force to investigate and could not stop. They are the gang that operates inside ADX Florence even though the federal government says it is impossible. They are the gang that has outlasted every other black crew of its era. They are not coming. They are already here. In every federal prison from coast to coast, quiet, organized, permanent, the most powerful gang you have never heard of, the DC Blacks.